They say no one ever escaped from the heart of the Deep South. They say the Cotton Kingdom was a fortress, a hell from which there was no exit. But they never met John Fed Brown. He was the man who escaped not once, but 5 times. The man who walked over 1,500 miles on his final journey to freedom, proving that the human spirit can outwalk any chain. This is his story. Born around 1810 in Virginia, John Brown's life began in chains. At just 10 years old, he was marched in a coffle, a line of chained human beings, for 500 agonizing miles from Virginia, through the treacherous Carolina swamps, to a plantation near Eatonton, Georgia. This was the heart of the Cotton Kingdom, and for the next 15 years, it was his prison. The daily torture he endured under his owner, Thomas Stevens, is hard to even imagine. But inside John, a fire was burning. A fire that no amount of brutality could extinguish. In 1832, at 22, he made his first run for it. He covered 100 miles, reaching Savannah before being captured. His punishment, 500 lashes. But it didn't break him. 2 years later, he tried again. This time, he survived for 3 months in the swamps, a fugitive living off the land. When caught, they fitted him with an iron horn collar. It weighed 14 pounds, with 4-foot-long rods and belts designed to make hiding impossible. He was forced to wear this instrument of torture for 18 long months. But still, his spirit was not broken. In 1836, he made his third escape. He reached Augusta before being recaptured. The punishment this time was designed to mark him forever. With a red-hot iron, they branded the letter R for runaway onto both of his cheeks. They wanted to sear his shame into his very flesh for the world to see. But what they saw as a brand of shame, he would turn into a badge of defiance. His fourth escape in 1839 was his most audacious yet. He managed to board a steamboat and travel for 100 miles all the way to New Orleans. But his luck ran out. He was sold again, this time to a doctor. Hamilton in Mississippi. This new chapter brought new, unspeakable horrors. Doctor Hamilton wasn't just a slave owner, he was a sadist who used John for so-called medical experiments, applying hot blistering plasters that ate his flesh down to the bone. After one escape attempt, he was subjected to pickling, where salt, pepper, and vinegar were rubbed into his open lash wounds. He was forced to walk a treadmill for 12 hours a day, whipped if he slowed. They tried everything to break him. They branded him, collared him, whipped him, and tortured him. But all they did was fuel his determination. Then came January 1850. John Brown, now 40 years old, decided this would be his last escape. The final one. He slipped away from the Mississippi plantation under the cover of night, with nothing but the North Star as his guide. What followed was a journey that defies belief. For 67 consecutive nights, he walked. He walked over 1,000 miles, crossing 6 states. He traveled only at night, sleeping during the day in hollow logs, thickets, and even bare caves. He crossed the Pearl River on a floating log, his clothes tied to his head to keep them dry. He ate stolen sweet potatoes, raw, to survive in Alabama. In Kentucky, he crossed the mighty Ohio River in the dead of winter, crawling over thin march ice that cracked like gunshots beneath him. Every step was a risk, every shadow a potential enemy. When he finally reached Michigan, he was starving and barefoot. He worked as a carpenter for 3 weeks, just long enough to earn money for a pair of shoes to finish his journey. And then, on the 67th day, as the sun rose, he stepped onto Canadian soil. He had lost 60 pounds, weighing just 108 pounds. He was gaunt, scarred, and exhausted. But for the first time in his 40 years of life, he was free. He watched his first sunrise as a free man. His journey wasn't over. In August of that year, he sailed from Liverpool to London, England, where he would live out the rest of his days. He married, found community, and never again felt the sting of a master's whip. He was a free man. But John knew his story had to be told. The trauma was too deep for him to write it himself, so in 1855, he dictated his life story to a British abolitionist named Louis Alexis Chamaravzo. The book was titled *Slave Life in Georgia*. It was an unflinching, raw account of the horrors he had endured and the incredible journey he had undertaken. It was the only slave narrative ever published by a fugitive who had escaped from the very heart of the Cotton Kingdom. The book was an instant sensation in London, the first edition selling out in just 11 days. But in America, it was a different story. Publishers refused to touch it. Southern newspapers furiously denounced it as a tissue of lies. They couldn't handle the truth. The truth that a man could endure everything they threw at him and still walk out of their grasp. As John himself put it in the book as most famous passage, they say a nigger can run from Georgia. I ran from Georgia to Mississippi and back to Canada. Let them say it again. Today, we don't have to just read about his journey, we can follow it. The Fed Brown Freedom Trail, a 1,337-mile path, now marks his incredible route from Georgia to Canada. It starts at the site of the old Stevens Plantation, now a quiet pecan orchard, where a bronze plaque bears the cast of his scars. It takes you through the Great Dismal Swamp, where you can hear audio of Fed describing how he hid. In Cincinnati, a life-size statue shows him breaking his chains. And at the end, in Windsor, Canada, a freedom flame burns at the exact spot where he first tasted freedom. John Fed Brown died a free man in London in 1876. He was buried in Abney Park Cemetery, his headstone paid for by supporters. It reads, John Brown, Fed, escaped American slavery. And then, a final, powerful message to the country that had enslaved him, Ingrata Patria. You kept my chains, I kept my soul. For decades, slaveholders could never find his grave. But in a beautiful twist of fate, in 2024, DNA connected his descendants in London with their living cousins back in Georgia, reuniting a family torn apart by slavery across an ocean and generations. His entire, unbelievable life can be summed up in one powerful sentence he himself said, "They sold me for times. I escaped 5. John Fed Brown didn't just run for himself. He ran to prove it could be done. He walked out of hell and, by telling his story, left a map for everyone who dared to follow. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more incredible stories of resilience and the human spirit. The road to freedom is long, but as John Brown proved, it can be walked.